it hides in plain sight. Epstein was hiding in plain sight. We all knew about him. We all knew what he was doing. But we had no one that was, legal aspect that would go after him. They were afraid of him. For whatever reason, they were afraid of him.
The Epstein documents were released today, making public the names of almost 200 people associated with disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. A court released the unredacted names that include some anticipated names like former President Bill Clinton.
Sometimes there were other people on the island that were important people. I saw Bill Clinton sitting with Jeffrey on the living room porch area, which was Jeffrey's favorite spot.
Prince Andrew.
She described dancing with you and you profusely sweating, and that she went on to have bath, possibly.
There's a slight problem with the sweating because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was, oh actually, yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at, and I simply it was almost impossible for me to sweat, and it's only because I have done a number of things in the recent past that I'm starting to be able to do that again. So I'm afraid to say that there's a medical condition that says that I didn't do it, so therefore.
And Limited Brands founder Lex Wexner.
Epstein worked as Les Wexner's personal finance manager in the 90s. A document on file in Franklin County shows Epstein was given power of attorney over much of Wexner's financial affairs in 1991.
Actually, the reports are, at least, that Mr. Wexner gave him this really expensive townhouse here.
Yeah. So there was a transfer of the townhouse. It's very blurry if you look at how that happened. For zero, and then there was payment. It's unclear, the money trail. And then also, don't forget, he also transferred the jet over, a Boeing 727.
Some notable new names include lawyer and law professor Alan Dershowitz.
I saw Alan Dershowitz on the island. It was more of a business meeting.
Now, the one point I do want to make is that I understand all the feminist groups and the radicals who think this is the worst thing in the world, that anybody ever had any contact with Jeffrey Epstein. Where are all those radical feminists when it comes to the Hamas rapes of young Jewish girls, sexual abuse, beheadings? They are quiet. They are silent. The incredible hypocrisy of the Me Too movement. Me Too, except if you're a Jew. And I want to have a list of all the radical feminists who are pushing hard, and I understand that, to get all these names revealed. And I want to know how many of them have ever actually condemned Hamas for the rapes that we now know occurred and the murders that occurred. How many have been silent, and how many, like the National Lawyers Guild, have actually approved of what Hamas did? So let's put this in context.
Sorry, nice try.
Former U.S. Senator George Mitchell, former New Mexico Governor, the late Bill Richardson, and magician David Copperfield.
He allegedly performed magic tricks for Epstein and several of his victims during a dinner at Epstein's townhouse in New York City in 2016.
And a number of high-profile names have appeared on the records, including, and not limited to, former presidents Bill Clinton and Donald Trump.
Obviously, our current president has had relationships with Epstein in the past, and there are those, Katie Johnson and maybe other victims who have accused Trump of being involved in things like this. In my experience, Trump supporters will not listen to anything along those lines. Obviously, we're not a court of law here right now, but are those claims of that case was dropped? It was dropped before it went to court. In your opinion as a lawyer and your experience, is there anything you can say as to the validity of those claims, or whether or not there will be any more about that?
Nothing at all. The only thing that I can say about President Trump is that he is the only person who, in 2009, when I served a lot of subpoenas on a lot of people, or at least gave notice to some pretty connected people that I wanted to talk to them, he is the only person who picked up the phone and said, let's just talk. I'll give you as much time as you want. I'll tell you what you need to know, and was very helpful in the information that he gave, and gave no indication whatsoever that he was involved in anything untoward whatsoever, but had good information that checked out and that helped us, and that we didn't have to take a deposition of him.
And that was in 2009?
That was in 2009. So,
do you know if there's any truth to James Patterson's claims that Trump kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago?
I've definitely heard.
Former Vice President Al Gore, lawyer Alan Dershowitz, Prince Andrew, and theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking. Again, we want to remind you that appearing on this list does not connect any of these people to illegal activity.
What's been the fallout and the reaction to these 40 out of 250 documents released in the States so far?
Yeah, Kenny, it's been a tremendous amount of attention, a lot of smoke, but no fire. There's a lot of very prominent names on there. You've got Bill Clinton, you've got Donald Trump, you've got Prince Andrew. But as you've mentioned, there's no real new allegations about wrongdoing by any of these very, very famous people. So while it's somewhat salacious and interesting, it doesn't seem to change anybody's position about what went wrong with Mr. Epstein. That, yes, Bill Clinton knew him. Everybody knew that. Yes, Bill Clinton flew on his airplane, but he did not go down to the island where his alleged sex parties were taking place.
Sometimes there were other people on the island that were important people. I saw Bill Clinton sitting with Jeffrey on the living room porch area, which was Jeffrey's favorite spot.
Bill Clinton took the airplane to go on humanitarian missions overseas and so forth. You can tell similar stories about other famous people. So it looks like this will be much ado about nothing. There are still a few names that have not been released, and it may be that those will give us some new insights as to whatever actually happened with Mr. Epstein. But the bottom line is this. He had a lot of very, very famous friends. There is no question about that. And if anything, this raises new questions about his death. Did he really commit suicide in jail, or was there some effort to have him eliminated?
Do you think your brother killed himself?
Not now. No. When I first heard he was dead from suicide, I had no reason to doubt it, so I accepted that. But then after the autopsy and after Bill Barr made that asinine statement, I said, this was not a suicide.
But when you first heard the news, you thought it was a possibility that he killed himself.
Yeah, I accepted it as a fact. I heard it on the news. The government didn't notify me, as they said. I heard it on CNN in the morning of the 10th.
And you're his only survivor. You're the only surviving relative.
Yes, yes. He has no children, and our parents are gone. And there's no other siblings.
When did you start to think that he did not kill himself?
Well, after the autopsy and both pathologists, the city pathologist and Dr. Barden, came out of the autopsy and they said, this doesn't look like a suicide. It looks more like a homicide.
So what did you do then?
Well, I figured I'd have to look into this and see what's going on.
Were you shocked that he might have been killed?
It came as a surprise, yeah.
So as his only surviving relative, what did you do to find out what happened to him?
Well, I started to inquire about what took place. You know, the Justice Department was supposedly investigating. The initial death certificate said pending when it said cause of death, which means pending further investigation.
Yes.
So, but then a few days later, it was declared a suicide by the chief pathologist, who was not at the autopsy. And the questions became, what investigation was done in such a short period of time to make her determine it was a suicide? Or was she basing it on Bill Barr's statement? And
who was the chief pathologist who made that declaration?
Dr. Roman.
That was the pathologist who was there.
No, that was, Sampson. Barbara Sampson was the chief pathologist. Dr.
Right.
Roman did the actual autopsy with Dr. Barden.
So Barbara Sampson is the person who declared it officially a suicide, and she was not, as you said, at the autopsy. I mean, she was not present for it.
Correct. And, you know, when they call it a suicide, they stop investigating.
Is that the actual painting?
That is the painting.
That's beyond weird.
You know what's telling is where he put it, where he put that painting. That painting was in the entrance. So when you came in, right, the entrance of his apartment in New York, I believe, that painting was in the entrance. Why? That's a power play. That tells you, I own you.
Wow, big. That's
I own
so
you.
gangster. That was in Clinton's?
No, that was in Epstein's apartment.
Holy
Manhattan.
shit.
When you walk into we can fact check me, but when you walk into the right, it's there. You put a former president in a dress and high heels in your entry of your apartment. Yeah. What does that say?
We're not done with Jeffrey Epstein. I can tell you that for a fact. Can't tell you how I know, but I can tell you for a fact we're going to hear a lot more about Jeffrey Epstein in the coming year, and you may be even hearing from him directly. More on that as I'm allowed to tell you.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton, we had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it. I'm so pissed right now. Like, every day I get more and more pissed because I'm just like, oh my God, what we had was unreal. Other women backing it up. Hey, yep. Brad Edwards, the attorney, 3 years ago, saying there will come a day when we will realize Jeffrey Epstein was the most prolific pedophile this country has ever known. And I had it all 3 years ago.
I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was, oh actually, yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at. And I simply, it was almost impossible for me to sweat.